Japanese Lieutenant Kato ordered his man to drag 2 of the prisoner women to separate cells, whom was kidnapped earlier and now used as a test subject in their Sinister experiment to develop biological weapons that can be used in war against the USA. There they were forced to eat food, unaware that Lieutenant Kato had laced the water with mutant larvae as part of a Sinister experiment. As larvae take effect, one of the women becomes a creature that attacks back and kills many of the Japanese soldiers instantly. Soldiers quickly spray nitrogen gas onto the creature, calming it until it falls asleep. The soldiers prepare a cage to contain the monster, realizing that it has been emitting anthrax as a defense mechanism. As the creature sleeps, soldiers move it to the cell block. However, as it makes contact with the prisoners, anthrax spores spread, burning everyone who touches them. Myeongja, sensing the danger, stays away, but the others are not as fortunate. Those exposed to the spores develop severe burns and suffer immensely, unable to survive the ordeal. This was the quickest method used by the Japanese army to quickly deal with Korean prisoners. It all began in the year 1945. In Seoul, near the end of World War II, Korea was under Japanese rule. The Japanese government was doing everything possible to hide the news of the bombings in Tokyo, fearing it would expose their weakening power and inspire the people of Gyeongseong to rebel. Captured insurgents were given 2 grim choices: fight for the Japanese army or face death in a torture chamber. There was a man named Tang, a wealthy and influential pawn shop owner. Although not Japanese, Tang has built a thriving business and valuable connections, giving him the ability to find information and people with ease. One night, Tang is arrested by Japanese Army Commissioner Ishikawa, who accuses him of having an affair with his wife, Yuko Maeda, the daughter of General Maeda. Tang mocks Ishikawa, warning him that if Yuko finds out about his suspicions, it could cause trouble for insulting her honor. Reluctantly, Ishikawa releases Tang but threatens him with a photograph of Myeongja, Tang's missing pregnant lover. Ishikawa demands that Tang find her, or else face conscription into the army and the loss of all his wealth, including his pawn shop. Tang is the information king of Gyeongseong, and now with everything at stake, he decides to find Myeongja with no other option. Tang gathers his employees to discuss the commissioner's threat. Bae Hyung-sung, one of his workers, mentions rumors that Myeongja, along with several other women, has disappeared. Tang orders his men to contact everyone they know and gather information. He also asks Mrs. Null to secretly sell their most valuable items, so that, if the mission fails, they'll have enough money to escape quickly. Meanwhile, Myeongja is shown imprisoned in a cell alongside several other women. The Japanese army has kidnapped them to use as test subjects in their experiments to develop biological weapons for the war. 2 of the women are taken to separate cells, where they unexpectedly find food and water waiting for them. Hungry and thirsty, they eat and drink without hesitation, unaware that Lieutenant Kato has laced the water with mutant larvae as part of a Sinister experiment. That night, Tang follows a lead, suspecting that a friend might have fled with Myeongja. To avoid Ishikawa's spies, who are tailing him, he takes a dark, narrow alley and tries to enter his friend's place from the back. As he moves cautiously, he senses someone following him. Tang manages to confront the pursuer, but the stranger proves to be a highly skilled fighter. After a tough struggle, Tang lands a blow that knocks off the person's hat, revealing a strikingly beautiful woman. Captivated, Tang hesitates, lowering his weapon. The woman takes this chance to introduce herself, explaining that she's searching for a Japanese artist named Saimoto. She sought Tang, knowing he was a local information broker, to assess if he could be trusted. Tang, however, brushes off the task, saying he doesn't work for free and especially not for minor inquiries. The woman then confides that she is actually searching for her mother, who disappeared 10 years ago, and believes that Saimoto might know her whereabouts. Tang misunderstands her story and assumes that her mother ran off with Saimoto and has been living with him all this time. He advises her to let them be if they've been together for a decade. Enraged by his insensitivity, the woman slaps him and storms off. Tang, still intrigued, tries to compliment her, telling her that her eyes are beautiful. But this only aggravates her further. Believing he's mocking her, she curses at him, warning him to stay away unless he wants her to gouge his eyes out. Tang later meets with his friend Kwon-jun, who confesses that he once had an affair with Myeongja. However, when she became Commissioner Ishikawa's mistress, they grew distant. Before parting, The two argue. Jun, who is part of the resistance, tries to convince Tang to join their cause and share his wealth to support the fight against the Japanese. Tang refuses, saying he has no cause to fight for. His only goal is survival. The fortune he built on his own belongs to him, and it's what keeps him safe. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kato closely monitors the horrifying effects of the larvae the women ingested. The first woman suffers unbearable headaches, so severe that she resorts to drastic actions to end her pain. The second woman starts vomiting, and we see the larvae spreading through her body, triggering grotesque changes. Tang receives news from Mrs. Nawal, who tells him about two people claiming to be detectives, experts in tracking down missing persons. To Tang's surprise, the detectives are Yoon Jung-won and his daughter, Yoon Chaok, the same woman who attacked him earlier. When Chaok realizes Tang is the client, she tries to persuade her father not to take the case, calling Tang a despicable man. Tang, however, proposes a deal. He will track down the artist Saimoto for them if they help him find Myeongja. Reluctantly, they agree to the arrangement. Meanwhile, we see that Saimoto is with the Japanese military, who escort him to the cell of the second woman. Her body has transformed into a monstrous state, and the soldiers order Saimoto to draw the creature she has become. A flashback reveals that a year earlier, Saimoto applied for a job at a hospital, only to be forced into documenting the horrific results of inhuman experiments conducted on prisoners. His task was to sketch these atrocities in excruciating detail. Having witnessed too much, Saimoto knew there was no turning back. In a moment of despair, he wept in a quiet room where a janitor, who was also a prisoner, tried to comfort him. He noticed a green wooden figurine on a necklace around her neck. Back in the present, as the mutated creature lunges toward him, Saimoto spots the same necklace around its neck. Horrified, he realizes that the monster was once the janitor. When he examines the sketch of the same woman, it becomes clear that the creature is Yoon Chaok's mother, the woman she has been desperately searching for. His signature on the sketch explains why the detectives are after him. They believe he holds the key to her mother's disappearance. Later, the detectives uncovered that Yukiko Maida, Ishikawa's wife, orchestrated Myeongja's abduction and had her sent to Gyeongseong Hospital. This hospital is heavily restricted, allowing entry only to Japanese officials or those with government connections. To get inside, Tang persuades Yoon Jung to lend him his identification, since Jun's family status grants access to such places. The plan works, and they successfully infiltrate the hospital. While Tang and one of his employees distract the hospital staff, Chaok sneaks into the records room to search for clues. Just as she is making progress, the janitor from Saimoto's flashback interrupts her. Before she can act, Yoon Jung-won appears and pulls a gun on the man, only to discover that the janitor is secretly part of the resistance. As they prepare to leave, they hear a gunshot. A nurse dismisses it, saying it must have come from a nearby military base. But the detectives realized the noise came from below the hospital. They venture downstairs and discover the secret Japanese laboratory. There, they witness soldiers engaged in a struggle with the same monstrous creature. Now able to stretch its body parts over long distances, it has attacked several soldiers, causing the gunfire. The detectives urge Tang and his employee to leave and continue searching for Saimoto while they head deeper into the basement to rescue Myeongja. As Chaok is about to leave, Tang impulsively grabs her arm. Startled, she demands to know what he's doing, but Tang himself seems confused by his actions, unable to explain his sudden urge to stop her. Suddenly, sirens blare throughout the hospital, triggering an evacuation. As the hospital staff ushers out all visitors, the detectives, already in the basement, continue their mission. Downstairs, soldiers spray nitrogen gas onto the creature, calming it until it falls asleep. The soldiers prepare a cage to contain the monster, realizing that it has been emitting anthrax as a defense mechanism. While the creature sleeps, the soldiers move it to the cell block. However, as it makes contact with the prisoners, anthrax spores spread, burning everyone who touches them. Myeongja, sensing the danger, stays away, but the others are not as fortunate. Those exposed to the spores develop severe burns and suffer immensely, unable to survive the ordeal. Meanwhile, back at home, Tang is restless. Mrs. Nawal notices his unease and asks what's bothering him. Tang confesses that, although he's at risk of losing both his fortune and his life, All he can think about is Chaeok, and he doesn't understand why. Mrs. Nawal gently teases him, saying he ignored all the women who pursued him and ended up falling for the only one he couldn't win. It's a shame, she adds, because love is a disease that has no cure. The next morning, news spreads that the hospital has been sealed off due to contamination. Barriers are erected, and no one is allowed in or out. Later, Tang is visited by a nurse from the hospital, who is secretly part of the resistance. She delivers a message from Chaeok. They found Myeongja. The nurse describes seeing many dead people inside the hospital, but admits she doesn't know exactly what happened. Tang decides to go inside to find Chok. In the hospital, while soldiers are moving a cage into an elevator, they accidentally disconnect the nitrogen tanks. This causes the creature inside to wake up and attack. The creature starts attacking all the soldiers. One soldier named Endo sacrifices his comrades and manages to escape, but in this chaos, he is severely injured. Lieutenant Kato interrogates him to gather information, but the man is in too much shock to tell anything. Lieutenant Kato questions a surviving officer, Endo, demanding details about the creature's movements. He tells Lieutenant Kato they need to kill the monster as soon as he sees it because it is too dangerous. But Kato is strangely fascinated by it. Tang continues his search for Saimoto and receives indirect confirmation from Lady Maeda that Myeongja is indeed inside the hospital. Before leaving, Tang is instructed to send a visible signal from outside the hospital, informing his group that help is on the way. Meanwhile, Chaeok meets a soldier who was forced to join the Japanese army. He explains that even a small amount of anthrax can kill, recounting how he witnessed its effects in China. He confirms that Myeongja is alive and has played a key role in saving people from the brutal experiments taking place in the hospital's basement. He assists them by providing a hospital map and the last known location of Myeongja. During the conversation, he recalls his past where he was tortured by the Japanese. He was helpless at the moment, so he decided to take his own life. But as he was attempting it, Myeongja saved him. Back to the present, he pleads for their help to escape the abuse from his fellow soldiers. They make a plan, but the soldier must return to his post to avoid raising suspicions that could lead to a search of the hospital. The soldier helps them devise a perfect distraction, which is fireworks. The detectives promise to take him with them when they escape. Chaeok brings hopeful news to Tang, asking him to meet her for dinner, promising that Saimoto will be there. However, when Tang arrives, he is ambushed by a group of samurai thugs. By the time he manages to escape the thugs, Chaeok and Saimoto have already left. Feeling defeated, he returns home to find Juntaek waiting for him. An argument ensues between Tang and Mrs. Nawal, as Tang insists on going back to the hospital despite his injuries, while Mrs. Nawal urges him to prioritize getting treated first. A woman leads Tang to Saimoto, the painter who worked at Gyeongseong Hospital. They reunite, and later, Saimoto arrives at the hospital gate with a rickshaw. He informs the hospital staff that he has supplies ordered by the doctor, which prompts them to open the hospital door for him. The rickshaw that Saimoto brought did not carry any luggage. Instead, it was transporting Tang and his friend Juntaek, whereas, as the janitor goes back to work, the detectives head to the rooftop. Chaeok sneaks through the ducts and finds a laboratory filled with failed experiments and a cell containing children who are likely the next victims. She rescues the kids but has to hide when a doctor enters. The doctor sees the empty cells, so she has to kill him to prevent him from alerting the soldiers. Chaeok returns to the rooftop to signal her father, but to her surprise, some Japanese soldiers are patrolling there now. She signals her father, but nearby soldiers overhear the signals. They catch her father, but just then, Young-won, hiding, creates a distraction by the fireworks. As the sky lights up with fireworks, he attacks the soldiers. Chaeok joins the fight, and they manage to take down most of the soldiers. But just then, one soldier sneaks up on Chaeok, ready to shoot. But in an unexpected turn of events, Tang comes to save her and shoots the soldier, who has infiltrated the hospital to assist them. The fireworks were part of Tang's plan to distract the soldiers in the basement. Meanwhile, the hospital director asks Lieutenant Kato to create more creatures like the one attacking, but Kato explains that it's not easy, as all previous attempts have failed, except for the latest creature. The detectives gather with the children, and Tang, alongside his friend Jun, seeks out his kidnapped companions. Saimoto, the artist, is there too, having helped Tang enter the hospital. Chaeok is determined to find her. She tells Tang to get the kids to safety, while she continues the risky search for Myeongja. Chaeok has a flashback from her childhood. She used to play a thread game with her mother, who would show her the endless possibilities with a single thread. Those lessons have stayed with her, guiding her decisions even now. Japanese Army Commissioner Ishikawa was trying to locate the people responsible for the fireworks, as those are illegal in Gyeongseong. On the terrace, Tang is frustrated, as rescuing so many kids is not a part of the plan. On the other hand, the other soldiers discover the dead doctor killed by Chaeok and launch a search to track down the culprit. Tang and Chaeok manage to sneak their way through the building and finally reach Saimoto's room. As they enter, they notice a group of children gathered there. One of the older girls raises her hand and starts to explain her situation to everyone present. She tells them that she receives daily injections, which makes them all very curious and concerned. With a heavy heart, she reveals that many kids have died as a result of these cruel treatments. This shocking information deeply affects everyone in the room, especially Tang. As he listens to her story, a realization hits him hard. He starts to connect the dots and realizes that the commissioner's girlfriend Myeongja must also be suffering through similar illegal experiments. Tang reveals to Chaeok that Saimoto is the artist she is looking for. She shows him a drawing of her mother, but Saimoto can't gather the courage to tell her that her mother has become a monster. So he lies and claims not to know. In the room, a girl child sees the painting and screams in fear. Just then, a soldier hears a girl scream from Saimoto's room and quickly alerts his superiors. Meanwhile, Tang instructs a teenage boy from the group to pose as a rickshaw driver and escort the kids out of the hospital. He provides detailed instructions to ensure their safety. He gave them a written message and asked them to show it to Mrs. Nowell to ensure their safety. They eventually reach the pawn shop and show Mrs. Nowell Tang's message, who welcomes them. Saimoto stays behind to avoid suspicion while the others return to the rooftop to use the ducts again. Using a sword, Juntek takes out some unconscious soldiers from the earlier fight, leaving behind a message that reads, "For the freedom of Korea." But a guard spots the sword and raises the alarm. All soldiers are awakened and begin searching the area. Meanwhile, a lady named Yukiko Maeda is the main investor in the hospital. She comes to meet the director of the hospital, Ichiro, and tells her that she believes that Tang has infiltrated the hospital, and they must find him. She gives a direct order to Ichiro, telling him to ensure that Myeongja stays alive for her own plans that involve the baby she is carrying. She emphasizes that no harm must come to Myeongja until her plans can be fully realized. Meanwhile, the soldiers are tasked with dragging Myeongja out of her cell. They move her to another part of the building, but as they pass through the corridors, the creature watches them closely. It observes their movements and learns how to use the elevator. When the soldiers return to the elevator, they are completely unaware that the creature has already made its way inside. As soon as the doors open, the creature attacks them without warning. The soldiers try to escape from the terrifying beast, but they quickly find themselves outmatched and are brutally killed. Following this shocking turn of events, the creature goes on a rampage through the hospital, mercilessly killing any soldiers that get in its way. The chaos escalates, prompting the director of the facility to take immediate action. He decides to increase security measures throughout the building. This leaves the group with no choice but to find an alternate route to avoid the heightened danger. Back in the ducts, a soldier on the roof notices that the grate has been moved and starts following them. They escape through a laundry chute and land in the laundry room, but they are caught by the soldier. He knocks Chaeok down, and as he prepares to shoot her, Tang engages him in a fight. Jungwon takes care of Chaeok while Tang faces the soldier alone. Although Tang ultimately emerges victorious in the end, he suffers from several injuries during the fight. After the battle, Chaeok takes it upon himself to tend to Tang's wounds, ensuring he receives the care he needs. Meanwhile, Jungwon comes up with a plan. He suggests that they should split up in order to find Myeongja more quickly. He decides to head to the third floor of the building, while Chaeok and Tang agree to search the second floor together. As they explore the second floor, Tang enters a room and is immediately taken aback by a shocking sight. He sees a soldier being carried off by a terrifying creature, which is feeding on the soldier's brain. This gruesome scene fills Tang with horror. At the same time, Chaeok is looking out the window, trying to keep an eye on their surroundings. Suddenly, he spots the monstrous creature approaching Tang. The creature is terrifying, with its long, tangled limbs that wrap around the pillars of the building. Tang stands frozen in place, completely shocked and unsure of what to do next. He realizes he must act quickly to avoid becoming the creature's next victim. The monster suddenly lunges at Tang, trying to attack him, but he reacts quickly and dodges to the side just in time to avoid being caught. At that moment, Chaeok arrives to help him. Without wasting any time, she loads her gun and takes aim at the terrifying creature. She pulls the trigger and shoots at the monster, giving Tang just the distraction he needs. Together, they make a run for it, fleeing down the hallway as the monster begins to chase after them. In a frantic rush, they manage to escape into a nearby room and slam the door shut behind them. Once they catch their breath, they start discussing what just happened. They wonder if the creature was somehow created in the hospital, considering all the strange experiments they've heard about. Meanwhile, Chaeok's father, alerted by the sounds of gunfire, arrives at the scene just in time. He spots the monster facing away from him, unaware of his presence. Thinking quickly, he scatters some gunpowder on the ground in front of the creature. With a fierce determination, he sets the gunpowder on fire. The flames erupt, startling the monster and causing it to flee in fear. This brave act gives Chaeok's father the chance to escape safely from the dangerous situation. Meanwhile, soldiers arrive to capture Chaeok and Tang in their hiding spots. Chaeok decides to surrender. In another part of the hospital, Juntaek, Tang's friend, finds some of their companions. He mentions wanting to use dynamite to take down the Japanese soldiers, but his friend insists they need to escape first. Juntaek is taken to Ichiro, who is furious that the monster is loose. He questions Juntaek about Taesang's whereabouts, but when Juntaek refuses to answer, he is imprisoned as well. Chaeok and Tang are also locked up, while her father hides in a vent, still hearing the monster. The lieutenant investigates the hospital, noting the number of soldiers killed by the monster in his diary. He learns that the creature has been hiding for the past hour. Tang and Chaeok are interrogated separately. A soldier tells Tang that to escape, he must buy him a house and a shop, revealing he has previously saved Tang's life. Tang insists on getting information about Myeongja and the experiments conducted in the hospital before agreeing to anything. Outside, the weather has turned, and Tang's manager and assistant are anxiously waiting for news of him. The doctor calls Juntaek's father, warning him that his son has crossed a line by associating with the Japanese and illegally entering the hospital. Inside, Juntaek faces threats and is forced to write down the names of his friends who entered the hospital with him. He remembers a cleaner mentioning a brother who died due to the experiments, prompting him to comply out of fear. In jail, the other prisoners are surprised to see Tang and ask why he is there. He explains he came to rescue a woman, but got caught. It turns out he had made a deal with the soldier to keep his assistant informed and secure his release. Meanwhile, the officer who is interrogating Chaeok becomes increasingly aggressive. He resorts to torture and humiliation to try to break her will. However, just as things start to escalate, Lieutenant Kato steps in. He quickly intervenes, halting the mistreatment and insisting that he needs to speak with Chaeok in private. Once they are alone, Lieutenant Kato begins to interrogate Chaeok. She takes a deep breath and tells him that she is desperately searching for her mother, who has been missing for 10 long years. With a trembling voice, she accuses the Japanese army of conducting strange and inhumane experiments in the hospital, where she believes her mother might be. As they talk, Lieutenant Kato looks closely at Chaeok's eyes and suddenly recognizes something familiar. He asks her the name of her mother, and it dawns on him that the monster he saw earlier is actually Chaeok's mother. However, he keeps this realization to himself and doesn't reveal it to her. Instead, he asks Chaeok how she felt when she encountered the monster. She admits, with a hint of fear in her voice, that she was indeed scared. In an attempt to calm her down and perhaps gather more information, the lieutenant offers her a drink of water mixed with a drug. He is unaware of the potential effects this drug may have on her, and he hopes it will help facilitate the conversation. Tang, now free, witnesses Chaeok being taken to a cell similar to her mother's, where a soldier locks her up. Before locking her in, the soldier who was previously also helping the group secretly hands her a blade. In the cell, Chaeok finds her mother's writing on the wall saying, "I miss you, Chaeok," which makes her cry. Realizing her mother might be nearby, Tang confronts and eliminates the soldiers, freeing Chaeok. She tells him about her mother's imprisonment, expressing her determination to find her. Tang warns her about the Japanese soldiers and the monster, but Chaeok takes a gun and confronts the lieutenant, demanding to know where her mother is. Meanwhile, Juntaek's father and Mrs. Nawal devise a backup plan to assist the group. With a heavy heart, Juntaek begins writing down details about the others on a piece of paper, ensuring their identities and stories are preserved. Whereas some prisoners are trying to escape, a soldier spots them and starts shooting, but Tang intervenes, instructing everyone to hide. He manages to shoot some soldiers, but one remains alive. Just as the soldier is about to shoot Tang, the monster appears and kills him. A nitrogen gas cylinder falls, and Tang shoots it, releasing gas that incapacitates the creature. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kato explains to Cheok that there is a monster inside every human, and the small creature called Najin brings out that monster, causing transformation. He reveals that the creature she fears is her mother. Meanwhile, Juntaik's father meets the Commissioner Ishikawa, urging him to investigate the hospital's activities. Commissioner Ishikawa refuses, stating it's outside his jurisdiction. Juntaik's father expresses concern for his son's safety, mentioning that Tang brought Juntaik to the hospital to find the commissioner's girlfriend. Finally, Tang is frustrated with the prisoners who escaped when he had promised to save them, questioning their loyalty when they accused him of not helping their country. Tang angrily confronts someone, saying, "All the deaths caused by the soldiers here are their responsibility." During this time, he meets Cheok's father, whom he warmly embraces. Cheok's father explains he is searching for his daughter. Tang reassured him not to worry and instructed him to take the people to another ward, promising that he would bring her back. Meanwhile, Cheok found herself in a confrontation with Lieutenant Kato. As they fought, Lieutenant Kato handed her a bottle of water, telling her that drinking it would turn her into a monster, making her believe his words. Cheok knocked him down with a swift kick, disarmed him, and held him at gunpoint. She demanded to know how they could cure the monster, but Lieutenant Kato admitted he didn't have the answer. Determined, she donned a soldier's uniform, aimed the gun at Lieutenant Kato, and ordered him to lead her to the monster, insisting she had to stop it at all costs. Elsewhere, a doctor discovered that the general knew their creature had escaped, putting everyone's jobs at risk. Soldiers approached Lieutenant Kato, informing him that if the monster didn't fall unconscious with nitrogen, they would have to kill it. Lieutenant Kato grimly replied that the only way to kill it was by burning it. Outside the hospital, rumors spread about a mission to find the commissioner's missing girlfriend, Myongja. Lady Maeda became aware of the search, while the Commissioner Ishikawa himself arrived at the hospital. Confronting the doctor in charge, Ichiro, Commissioner Ishikawa stated that they knew women were disappearing from the facility and insisted on searching the premises. Ichiro tried to deflect by claiming the hospital was closed due to disease, but Commissioner Ishikawa remained adamant, asserting that they would enter in safety suits, reasoning that if Ichiro had survived there, they could too. The Commissioner's security van is driven by Tang's manager, part of a plan to rescue trapped people. Meanwhile, Cheok is brought in chains before the monster, with soldiers watching to see what the creature will do. A young soldier, who had secretly helped Cheok, spots Tang near the room and tries to signal him. He asks the lieutenant what the monster would do to the girl, but the other soldiers quickly silenced him. The monster, enraged and ready to attack Cheok, suddenly pauses and screams, "Mother, don't." Hearing this, the monster stops. It has a flashback, recognizing Cheok as its daughter. Observing this moment, Lieutenant Kato orders the soldiers to open fire. The monster shields Cheok, absorbing the bullets to protect her. As nitrogen gas fills the area, the monster breaks Cheok's chains and pushes her away to safety. Heartbroken, Cheok realizes the monster is her mother. Tang finds Cheok, who tearfully reveals the truth. Shocked, Tang learns that it was all caused by Japanese experiments. Lieutenant Kato orders the soldiers to locate and eliminate Cheok. Juntaik is released, but has a black mask placed over his head and is taken away. Meanwhile, Tang's manager, Gu, distracts a soldier by sharing drinks with him. Soldiers frantically search for Cheok and Tang, but instead discover two discarded soldier uniforms. In a hidden ward, prisoners were hiding led by Cheok's father. They were prepared to fight soldiers who entered. As the soldiers enter, they realize it's Cheok and Tang in disguise. The soldier who promised to help Tang find the commissioner's girlfriend, Myongja, succeeds. Now they have a narrow 10-minute window to get out. If everyone isn't able to discreetly board the truck for the time being, they will be left behind. With the monster's true identity revealed and the stakes higher than ever, we're left wondering, will Cheok and Tang manage to escape with their lives? Can they save the innocent people still trapped in the hospital? And what will happen to the Japanese soldiers pursuing them? Back to Cheok, she sees dead soldiers lying around the hospital. In despair, she asks the monster what it has done. Before the creature can respond, Tang, now transformed with strange tentacles growing from his back, appears and attacks Cheok. Suddenly, she wakes up, revealing it was just a nightmare. Meanwhile, the real Tang lies unconscious on a pile of skeletons. The story flashes back 16 hours earlier to a tense moment when Tang and Cheok are on a mission to rescue prisoners. They are disguised as soldiers, blending in to avoid drawing attention to themselves. At 6 o'clock, they had planned their escape. knowing that timing was crucial. Using a makeshift rope made from torn pieces of clothing, they carefully lower the prisoners down to the security van below, where Tang's manager is anxiously waiting for them. When it's Chaeok's turn to climb down, she suddenly insists that Tang go first. She assures him that she will manage on her own, and that he should not worry about her. They start to argue about it, both determined to protect each other. But their discussion is cut short when a Japanese soldier unexpectedly enters the room. In a moment of panic, the young soldier, terrified for their lives, instinctively raises his weapon and shoots at the intruder. The loud bang of the gunfire echoes through the room, and it quickly attracts the attention of more soldiers. Hearing the commotion, they rush in, and chaos ensues as a firefight breaks out. Amid the chaos, Tang takes charge, shouting instructions to the others to leave the area immediately. He knows they must act fast to escape. While the others flee, Tang quickly sets up a barricade, pushing furniture and other objects in front of the door to block the soldiers from following them. His heart races as he prepares to hold off the enemy, determined to give everyone a chance to escape safely. In the chaos, Commissioner Ishikawa demands answers from Ichiro, who cryptically advises that if he truly wants to know, he should ask the Governor General or Lady Maida. This made Ishikawa uncomfortable. He adds that no Korean will leave this hospital alive, implying that Myeongja won't get out alive. During the intense fight, Tang sustains injuries while trying to protect the group. Amid the chaos, the young soldier who shot the intruder is also caught in the crossfire and is fatally shot. As he lies there, gasping for breath, he manages to reach for Chaeok. With his last ounce of strength, he hands her his badge and whispers for her to stay strong, reminding her that her mother is waiting for her. His words resonate deeply with Chaeok, filling her with both hope and sorrow. Just then, a man arrives and urgently informs them that everyone else has made it to the van and that they are the only ones left behind. Hearing this, Chaeok knows they must act quickly. She prepares to descend, ready to join the others, but Tang realizes he cannot leave just yet. He decides to stay behind to distract the soldiers, knowing that this may give Chaeok a better chance to escape. As Tang holds his ground, the soldiers close in on him, weapons raised and ready to strike. Just before they can kill him, Ichiro suddenly appears and shouts for the soldiers to hold back. His unexpected intervention buys Tang a moment of hope. Meanwhile, Tang's manager, Gu, stands at a distance, devastated by the situation. He knows Tang has saved many lives today, but he feels helpless as his boss remains trapped inside the building. Despite the chaos and his concern for Tang, Gu follows Mrs. Nawal's orders. With a heavy heart, he decides he must drive off without waiting for Tang, leaving him behind in the midst of danger. The weight of the decision hangs in the air as they both realize the risks they face, unsure if they will ever see each other again. Inside the hospital, Tang finds himself fighting against soldiers all alone. He knows he needs to escape, so he quickly climbs into a ventilation duct to avoid being caught. The soldiers realize where he has gone and begin to pursue him through the narrow passages. In a moment of desperation, Tang decides to jump down from the vent, landing in a dark room filled with skeletons. Meanwhile, the truck carrying the rescued prisoners finally reaches the city. Juntaik is the first to disembark, and he is greeted by his father, who rushes forward to embrace him. Their reunion is emotional, filled with relief and joy after the harrowing ordeal they endured. At the same time, Mrs. Nawal sells a prized possession to a buyer who is willing to help secure Juntaik's release from the hospital. Among the rescued prisoners, Myeongja, the commissioner's girlfriend, also steps out of the truck and reunites with Commissioner Ishikawa, who is waiting for her. Their reunion is bittersweet, given the circumstances. Tang's manager, Gu, races the truck away from the hospital. He knows that Commissioner Ishikawa does not want anyone to survive except for Juntaik and the girl, so he must be careful. In a clever move, a woman at a nearby bar signals for rickshaws to block the commissioner's truck, creating an opportunity for the manager to escape. When the commissioner's men finally catch up to the truck, they are shocked to find it empty. Everyone has gotten off at the bar, where Mrs. Nawal urges them to leave the city quickly before they are discovered. Outside, the bar owner celebrates the successful escape from Japanese captivity, relieved that they managed to outsmart the soldiers and secure their freedom. The atmosphere is filled with a sense of victory, but the danger is far from over, and everyone knows they must remain vigilant as they navigate their uncertain futures. Back at the hospital, Lady Maida learns Lieutenant Kato mixed a serum with water, which one of the four, Chaok, Tang, the commissioner's girlfriend Myeongja, or a soldier, has unknowingly drunk. No one knows who will transform into a monster. Furious, Lady Maeda calls Dr. Ichiro, scolding him for his failures. He tries to calm her by showing a report with photos of the monster. For now, Lady Maeda is silent. In the hospital, the nitrogen gas fails to subdue the monster completely. The lieutenant worries, wondering who among the four will mutate and how they can control the destruction. Meanwhile, Tang regains consciousness, covered in blood. Wherever his blood touches, the surface darkens ominously. Elsewhere, a woman returns a sewing machine to Tang's shop, only to find a badge attached, realizing her son is dead. The scene shifts to the commissioner's girlfriend, Myongja, whose face is being taken over by a strange creature. It's revealed that the serum and Najin water stolen from the lieutenant's office were used on her. Meanwhile, Myongja is shown on a bloody rampage, killing someone in the streets. In flashbacks, she recalls Lady Maeda telling her that she would become the mother of the commissioner's child and would be taken to Gyeongseong Hospital for care. However, instead of caring, Myongja was tortured. Lady Maeda later visits the hospital, but Lieutenant Kato warns the doctor that Lady Maeda is not allowed in. The doctor reminds him that she funds the experiments, making it impossible to deny her access. When Lady Maeda approaches the monsterized Myongja and calls her by name, Myongja almost attacks, but stops upon seeing Maeda's face. Commissioner Ishikawa wakes up one night to find Myongja missing. Tang, dressed in a soldier's uniform, meets Lady Maeda secretly and asks for her help. After assisting him, she leaves. Tang collapses from his wounds, while Chaeok waits for him outside his shop, worried. Her father tries to comfort her, but she tells him she saw her mother at the hospital, turned into a monster. When Tang wakes up, Lady Maeda warns him not to endanger his life again for others. Tang's assistant, who had been receiving false reports of his death, is overjoyed to see him alive. Tang immediately heads to the police station, where the commissioner interrogates him about releasing Korean prisoners. Tang bargains for their release in exchange for information. Commissioner Ishikawa confesses that his girlfriend is getting worse day by day. She has killed her maid by eating her brain. Desperate for answers, the commissioner tries to bribe Tang, but Tang leaves with the prisoners freed. When Tang visits Chaeok, she initially sees him as an enemy, but is stunned when she realizes he is alive. They embrace, rekindling their love. Commissioner Ishikawa confronts Lady Maeda, demanding the truth about the experiments, but she dismisses him. She reminds him that their marriage is just a convenience. She married him for influence, and he married her for her family's status. However, she admits her jealousy toward Myongja, who carries his child. The commissioner counters, saying he knows she's in love with someone else, Tang, who loves Chaeok. Lady Maeda visits Lieutenant Kato to learn more about the experiments. The lieutenant explains that humans are turning into monsters due to a parasite called Najin, found in the snowy mountains. This parasite takes over brains, turning people into monsters, like Chaok's mother. When Maeda discovers that the creature in the hospital is Chaok's mother, she goes into a state of shock. Meanwhile, Myongja attacks the officer spying on Song. Tang and Chaeok hear gunshots and rush to the scene. Tang fires a warning shot into the air, alerting the police, who start chasing Myongja. She flees into the forest, screaming that she doesn't want to die. Tang and Chaeok pursue her in secret to rescue her from the police. With the reality of the Najin parasite looming over them and the danger from Myongja escalating, we can't help but wonder, what will happen to Chaeok and Tang now that their lives are intertwined in such a way? Can they find a way to save Myongja, or will they be forced to confront the monstrous consequences of the experiments? Flashbacks came revealing the gruesome experiments that led to the discovery of Najin. In the present, Lady Maeda informs Lieutenant Kato that Ichiro will be sent to Japan, and he must take his place, with the condition that the monster must obey her. Meanwhile, Myongja attempts to escape the police but is captured. Myongja stumbled upon Commissioner Ishikawa. He questions her actions. Commissioner Ishikawa mocks her and orders her into a cage. Enraged, Myongja kills him, but leaves him alive long enough to be taken to the hospital. The police open fire, and Myongja is caged, left to suffer. Tang stops Chaeok as she tries to save her, but she returns home to find a letter from her father, revealing he has entered the hospital to reunite with her mother, leaving her devastated. Lieutenant Kato locks the monster in a cell, but he can't seem to calm down. Lieutenant Kato instructs the officers to find Chaeok, hoping she can help soothe it. Dr. Ichiro is desperately trying to save Ishikawa, but Lady Maeda is determined to have him killed, and it's already in motion. As tensions rise, Lady Maeda discovers a photograph of Chaeok and Myongja, deepening the intrigue surrounding their connection. Lieutenant Kato reveals to Lady Maeda that the monsters still have emotions, and that Myongja can't harm her daughter, Chaeok. Maeda realizes Chaeok is the girl Tang loves. She offers Lieutenant Kato her support in exchange for control over the monster. Chaeok's father sneaks into the hospital, where he sees his wife in her monstrous form. Enraged, he attacks the Lieutenant Kato. Lieutenant Kato, fearing the monster's hunger, orders Chaeok to be brought in, hoping to control the creature. Meanwhile, the doctor poisons the Commissioner Ishikawa under Lady Maeda's orders, ending his life. Tang promises to protect Chaeok, despite her guilt over killing the doctor. They plan to escape the city, but Lady Maeda's men surround them. Maeda accuses Tang of destroying the hospital, but he questions the morality of her experiments. She admits she once liked him, but was always overshadowed, first by Chaeok's mother and now by Chaeok. Tang reassures Chaeok, leading her to a room in the pawn shop filled with precious items. He gives her an opal bracelet, promising that they will live to see a liberated Korea. They share a tender embrace and kiss. Afterwards, Tang departs, followed by Mrs. Nawal. Later, Tang meets with Juntaek, who has recovered and seeks assistance from the rebels to acquire dynamite for a planned attack on the hospital. Meanwhile, Commissioner Ishikawa's funeral is underway, and the police are instructed to officially report his death as honorable. During Ishikawa's funeral, Chaeok manages to smuggle in a gun and shoots Ichiro before collapsing to the floor and then mysteriously vanishing. Tang, alerted to the incident, searches frantically for her, but she seems to have disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, the monster breaks free from the cage, further adding to the chaos. When Tang arrives at the funeral site, Mori informs him of Chaeok's disappearance, adding that an unknown but powerful figure appears to be orchestrating events from the shadows. Later, the police raid the pawn shop, hoping to capture Chaeok. Byomo, having betrayed Tang by reporting his every move to the Japanese, is overheard by Mr. Gu, who listens in on one of Byomo's phone calls. Meanwhile, Jung-won resists as officers try to take him to feed the monster. Maeda visits Tang and coldly urges him to move on from Chaeok, claiming she is dead. Though heartbroken, Tang recalls Mori's suggestion and demands proof of Chaeok's death. Maeda reminds Tang that she orchestrated his rise and warns him not to make an enemy of her. Tang stands up to her, pointing out that her cruelty is the root of his family's betrayal. Maeda, affected by his words, is left conflicted as Tang leads the others back to the pawn shop. Chaeok, previously held by Maeda, has now been transferred to the hospital. Mr. Gu sets out to find her, while Tang and Mrs. Nawal console each other. As this unfolds, Lieutenant Kato and Chaeok's eyes meet in a tense moment, just as the monster breaks free from below, shattering the metal bars in the path. Just then, Chaeok reflects on her childhood dreams of having a happy family and a normal life, dreams that never came true. Maeda mocks her aspirations, revealing that she knew Chaeok's mother, casting an eerie familiarity over her cruelty. Meanwhile, Byomo informs Tang that Maeda has been asking about Chaeok's whereabouts, and he finally discloses that he knows where she is. Preparing for the worst, Tang entrusts the key to the pawn shop to Mrs. Nawal, instructing her to sell it if he doesn't make it back. He bids Juntaek farewell, promising they'll reunite over drinks after everything is over. A rickshaw rolls up to the hospital gate, catching the soldiers' attention, only to explode as they approach it, creating chaos. Elsewhere, Saimoto learns about the monster's husband and daughter, adding a new layer of complexity to the turmoil. Inside the hospital vents, Jung-won and Tang cross paths. Tang updates Jung-won on Chaeok's location, handing him ship tickets to Shanghai and urging him to escape with her. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kato uses Chaeok as a human shield while escaping from the monster. Amid the escalating confrontation, the monster is blasted with nitrogen gas, disorienting him while Lieutenant Kato seizes the remaining vials and makes his escape. Jung-won, sensing that his time is limited, urges Tang to escape with Chok and live the life he deserves, while he himself chooses to stay with the monster. Tang arrives just in time to rescue Chaeok. As Jung-won begins to sing a familiar melody, the monster, drawn by the music, recognizes it and is captivated when he sees Jung-won's necklace, a token from their past. The emotional moment is short-lived as the dynamite Jung-won set detonates, causing a massive explosion that kills the soldiers and devastates the hospital. With the building in chaos, Chaeok learns her father's intentions and urges Tang to escape with her. As they make a run for it, they encounter Saimoto, who discreetly assists in their getaway. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kato is momentarily distracted by Myongja, who is in labor, and pauses to assess the situation. Seizing the opportunity, Tang contacts Mrs. Nawal, who quickly gathers the valuables from the pawn shop and dispatches Byomo to deliver them to him. Unaware that Maeda's men are trailing him, Byomo attempts to evade his pursuers, but soon realizes he's being closely monitored. In a final confrontation, Chaeok insists that Tang leave her to handle things on her own, but Tang refuses, affirming that they're in this together. As they wait for Byomo's arrival, a group of men in black emerges from a car, led by none other than Maeda herself. She confronts Tang, implying that betrayal is nothing new to her, as even Myeongja had once been close to her before turning against her. She bids them a cold farewell, setting her men upon them, and Tang and Chaeok brace themselves for a fierce battle. As they flee, the monster, having broken free, rushes to aid Chaeok and Tang, who are both injured from the earlier battle. In the midst of their escape, Chaeok catches a glimpse of her mother, who is wounded. She tries to go to her, but Tang pulls her back, urging her to focus on getting out alive. Confused and still disoriented, the monster perceives Tang as a threat and moves to attack him. Before he can strike, Chaeok steps between them, desperately trying to reason with the monster. She confesses her love for Tang, pleading with the monster to stand down, but in the tense moment, her strength wanes and she collapses, fatally wounded. Tang, devastated, falls to his knees beside her. The weight of her confession and the horror of her loss left him shattered, surrounded by the aftermath of their struggle. The monster, realizing what she's done and overcome with regret, watches in silence as Tang holds Chaeok in his arms, a heartbreaking testament to the sacrifices they made in their fight for freedom and each other. Inside the eerie, dimly lit hospital, a soldier stumbles upon Lieutenant Kato cradling Myeongja's newborn baby, who is uncharacteristically still. As the soldier peers closer, a chilling sight emerges. Najin, the ominous entity, visibly writhes beneath the infant's skin, shifting within the baby's head. At Ishikawa's funeral, the mournful ceremony takes a dark turn. Juntaek approaches Maeda with a somber expression, handing her a letter with Tang's name on it. Curiously, she unfolds it to find only the word farewell scrawled inside. Suspicion flickers in her eyes as she begins to notice the subtle but undeniable presence of rebels, including Mr. Gu, scattered among the crowd, blending in with quiet intensity. Her gaze sharpens as she realizes the horrifying truth. The building is filled with dynamite. With a surge of panic, Maeda tries to escape, but it's too late. The rebels give each other knowing nods as the dynamite ignites, engulfing the room in flames. The explosion echoes through the city, signaling both the literal and symbolic end of Maeda's oppressive reign, as the rebels exact their final, dramatic act of resistance. At the bar, Tang and Juntaek share a drink as they'd promised each other. Juntaek has a flashback of confessing that he'd betrayed Tang to the Japanese after being tortured. Tang returns to the pawn shop, still heartbroken and longing for the love he's never received. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kato meets with Maeda, now in a wheelchair with a severely burned face, and offers her a choice: join him in his experiments or leave for Japan peacefully. He leaves a glass of water in front of her before departing. Whereas, underwater, the monster is clutching Chaeok's lifeless body. The monster sacrifices herself by removing the Najin parasite from her brain and placing it into Chaeok, reviving her. The monster then dies, leaving Chaeok alive. The scene shifts to a television program about Korea's history, and as the camera zooms out, someone calls out, "Hojae." The man, resembling Tae-sang, turns toward the sound. Was Najin indeed hiding in Maeda's cup? And if drinking it could transfer the entity to her? With Najin now inside Chaeok, her fate is uncertain. Will she become more human than her mother? Or will she follow the same dark path? Share your thoughts and predictions in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more thrilling content.